Welcome to the Center for Transformation Institute podcast, where we are uniting with therapists everywhere for personal and professional growth. Your journey starts here at the place therapists grow.
Well, Dawn, it's so good to be with you today.
I am thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me, Monica.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to kind of recap a little bit about how we've met this year and what our relationship has been like, and then kind of let everybody know who's listening in, what that's been like for us. You've been tracking with the life model for quite some time, correct?
Yes, I think I was first introduced to the life model around 2004. So very nearly 20 years.
Nearly 20 years. It's a long time. And for me, it was around 2014. So, I mean, for me, I had heard your name a few times for sure, because you've been around in those circles, and I knew you were a therapist. I think I saw you on a video once or something, and I'm like, I want to meet her at some point. And it was years ago. And so I think Chris Kersey introduced us this year.
He did, yes. I remember he sent us both an email and said, I can't believe you two don't know each other. And so that was kind of fun.
Yeah. And this might be like our fourth or fifth time to talk, maybe even sixth. It seems like, we got connected because I'm doing this continuing education curriculum. You've been a therapist in the past, and we were like, hey, let's talk. It took us a while to set up the talk, but once we did, we were kind of like, oh, well, this is interesting. We're going to have to talk more.
So we just keep talking.
That's right. When are we talking next? And I think it has something to do with just what you're doing with Deeper Walk. And we definitely want to get more into that. And then what I'm doing with this continuing education, but really how we have the same training. We've been, both worked as mental health counselors. And so there's definitely a camaraderie or a connection that we have there. So I would love to hear you kind of give big picture around how you came to know the model, right? What that was like for you, but then also kind of leading us into what you're doing now.
Well, that's a big topic. So yeah, you want the 30-second version or the 30-minute version?
Somewhere in between, maybe.
Yeah, probably. Okay. So wow. From the early 90s, God had called me into prayer. And there's a whole backstory about that might be fun to unpack sometime. But eventually that leading in prayer, God told me to go back to school and get a degree in counseling. And so I did. And I got a master's degree like you do as a counselor. And then I was having kids and trying to get licensed. And it took me 5 years to get licensed. And when I was pregnant with my youngest daughter, I was working at a secular counseling agency, doing counseling the way I'd been taught to do it in my master's program. And I had a client that had multiple diagnoses. And I knew I was going to need to transition her slowly to another therapist. And so I let her know, you have 6 months, I'm going to be having a baby. And when I do, I'm leaving this job and I won't be able to see you anymore. And so I want to walk with you while you transition to another counselor. And instead of finding a clinical therapist, she found these pastoral counselors that were doing prayer ministry.
Okay.
And so, she was seeing them and seeing me at the same time, and they were so busy they could only get her in once a month. And I was like, okay, this is pretty wild. And so she'd go to see them once a month, and then she was coming to see me weekly. And I was watching her make these huge leaps in her recovery. And I'm like, what is happening? What are they doing? She was doing all of the things that I'd been asking her to do. And, but she would never do them for me, and she was doing them with them. And I said, what are they doing? And she said, we're just praying. And so after this kept happening, I called them up and said, what are you guys doing over there? Because I want in on it. You know, God had been calling me to prayer, and he had me become a counselor. And so they said, well, come on over and find out. So after I had my daughter, I started working with them. Well, they operated from a life model perspective, and they did inner healing prayer work. So they were at the time doing theophostic prayer, because Emmanuel prayer had not yet been developed by Dr. Lehman. And so I learned theophostic prayer. I learned some things about spiritual warfare, because they'd been trained through the precursor to Deeper Walk International, with whom I now work. And so I just got trained in all of this. But while I was there, I saw these VHS tapes. That's how old I am and how long ago this was. There was a VHS tape of Dr. Jim Wilder explaining borderline personality disorder. And I watched that videotape and I was like, oh, that's how this works. And that's, and they were just, it just made so much sense. And I was like, anybody who can explain that, I need to learn more about. So I just began finding everything I could. I bought Living from the Heart Jesus Gave You, which was the only book they had out at the time, which is the life model book. That was the original one. So I bought that book. I was watching any videos I could get. I ordered all of the munchies, which was Dr. Wilder talking to his Sunday school class about neuroscience and theology. And they're amazing. I still listen to those in my car.
I love them.
And I keep learning things. I probably listened to them 4 or 5 times, and it's like, oh yeah, this is so good.
Yeah, it was like, have I ever heard this before? Even though I've listened to it 5 times.
Yes.
So rich.
But what was so the great thing about the life model is it is so comprehensive, and there are so many different things that apply to therapy, but also to my own life. I mean, in experiencing prayer ministry myself, in submitting to inner healing prayer, because one of the things I was trained, they were like, you're not doing this until you've experienced it. And so I experienced inner healing prayer, and there was so much healing that I didn't know I needed. My range of emotion was probably about this big. And as I walked through prayer ministry, it just expanded, which is a painful process because it starts with the negative stuff. But, just like we train our clients, but I started to heal. And once I was healed, I was able to grow. And that's part of the journey that God has had me on as well, is I went from counseling into coaching and helping people understand that it isn't just about getting to normal, right? It's like once people heal, the world opens up, because God's dreams for us are so much bigger than our dreams for ourselves. Yes. And so yes, we need to deal with the trauma that has misshapen us and allow God to go in and do that heart surgery and remove the things and do the chiropractic adjustments and get us so we're growing straight and so the healing is amazing. But once we've experienced healing, then we grow in maturity in ways that we never thought were possible. And so there was that in my own life. And then also it gave me a way to help my clients, and not just to do therapy with them, but also to give them some amazing tools that they could use at home. And I did a lot of work with children at the time. My first counseling jobs were all in school systems, and most of my work was with kids. And I could confidently have the parents come in and say, yes, I will help your child, but I want to help you because you're with your child 7 days a week. I get 1 hour, 1 day a week, maybe.
Right.
And so if I can help you understand what's going on with your child and be able to help them in the moment as they're experiencing these things, then you're going to see real change and real transformation, not just sin management. I mean, think about it. Sometimes what we do as therapists, it's really just, we talk about anger management. What if our clients could experience healing so that it takes them a lot more until they get angry? And what if those places of trauma actually healed in them, and they were able to live with joy and to experience true transformation, not just managing their symptoms? And that's what I saw with the life model, was true healing and transformation.
Oh, that's amazing. So you were able to learn the model, and it was like in congruency or in connection with the healing prayer.
Yes.
Grabbed all of it similarly at the same time, living from the heart, the munchies, Dr. Wilder and his teaching on borderline, as well as being trained in some inner healing prayer approaches, and getting that done yourself. So you were able to take the new freedom that you had from had experienced in terms of some healing, and you were then able to apply that and the knowledge that you from listening to Wilder. And it sounds like you had to take a break when you had a baby, but you went back to therapy for a while. Is that what you were saying?
Well, the break was between doing therapy the way I'd been trained to in my master's program, and then after I'd had my daughter, I came in and started learning the life model and the inner healing prayer work, which eventually, Emmanuel prayer is amazing. It just is so elegant and helpful, and frankly, it makes being a counselor so much easier, because we become the assistant. Jesus is the real therapist. I love what Marcus Warner says. He says, there's only one wonderful counselor, and I'm not him.
I'm not him.
And so I became the scribe, but what we can do, what we are there to do, is ask the right questions and help guide the conversation and help people. We create an environment where people can meet with Jesus and bring him their deepest hurts and traumas and experience true healing. And there is a level of expertise to that. I mean, it's a skill that we grow in. Prayer is a skill.
Right.
And yes, the youngest child can learn to pray, but how many of us know those saints in the faith that we're like, gosh, I wish I could pray like them. So if we think of it as like, I laid out 5 levels of prayer in my book, Strategic Business Prayer. And so we talk about these 5 levels of prayer that people can learn. So
yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. That sounds amazing. What you're saying, it makes me
have to have another podcast.
Let's do it. Yeah, we need to more podcasts. It makes me think of a conversation I was having with one of our clinicians today, who's newer in the field. But it was taking me, she was saying, it's hard when I am talking to a client, I'm listening to them, but then later I think, I wish I would have said this, or I would have told him about this curriculum. And I said, yeah, it is a skill to learn to listen to the Holy Spirit while you're listening to the client. And something that I think one of my mentor therapists told me when I first started in therapy, she was ahead of me in years and also in terms of education. And she had mentioned just that idea of kind of having that constant conversation going on with the Holy Spirit while you're in connection with the client. And I can see what you're saying right now, and just how much after 20 years, I've grown in my ability to do that. And talking to other younger therapists today, like offering her just a little bit of insight. It's like, yeah, this can happen. We can do this. This is a way to know the Lord, and a way to minister to people. I guess the way to say it is coming alongside him as he ministers to people. Yes. Work that he's doing in some and discerning what he wants us to say, or what questions, like you said, what good questions to ask. Good.
Well, and there are ways in which, there are some things that only God can do. This was something that book, I think it was in Living from the Heart Jesus Gave You, where Dr. Wilder talks about it, that there are things that only God can do. And so therefore he does them. And there are other things that he has given us the responsibility and the dominion for. And if we don't do them, he won't necessarily step in and make sure they happen. And so there's this beautiful partnership that happens when we partner with God and when we do our part in that process. And when we invite him to help us with our part, because just because he gave us authority doesn't mean we have to do it by ourselves. We can invite him into that.
Yes. Yes.
And amazing things happen. And sometimes I sit back and I go, wow, I get to do this.
Yes. Yes.
This is so much fun.
I know. It's so fun. It's like when sometimes when you and I talk, we talk about being in God's business. Like we're employed. Yes. We really like our boss. He's like fun to work for. So awesome. Okay. So I kind of want to go two different directions here, but I'm feeling like it might be wise right now to ask you specifically, as you're talking about your own healing process, how I want to really understand, I want to see if you can articulate at what point did you know Life Model was something special? At what point, and because of what,
Well, I think the first point was watching that video and when he could explain borderline personality disorder. And when I was working on my master's, we were told that there's a lot of therapists that just won't even touch axis 2 disorders. So, and so when he was able to explain those axis 2 disorders, it made a lot of sense. And then another area was in walking through the maturity model. And so recognizing that in my mind, the maturity model is a better diagnostic tool than the DSM-4. And that may be a radical thing to say, but for me to be able to look at the individual tasks and the group tasks and that list of what happens when these tasks don't get accomplished at the stage of maturity that people are in, that enabled me to help people so much more. When I graduated with my master's, Monica, I don't know if you felt this way. I remember seeing those first several clients and going, I know how to diagnose you, but I don't have a clue how to help you. I felt like that's all I got out of therapy school was, well, I can diagnose you. And I was just always scrambling for how do I actually help this person? Right. And but with the Life Model, this one tool was so powerful to actually be able to go, oh, okay, I see. I was either, is it trauma or is it a maturity issue? And so if it's trauma, we need to do inner healing prayer. We need to help you heal from that trauma. If it's an issue of maturity, all right, how do I help you start practicing some things that will help you grow in these areas and build capacity and then be able to move forward in your life? And it was so much simpler than anything else.
It's a very profound document. The chart, the checklist, and it took me years to really pour over it and then live out my life. I think, and apply those thoughts, those concepts, and oh, this is what this is. This is what this is. And of course I used it immediately, but I have so much more proficiency now as I meditated on the concepts, and I think it's very rich and there's a lot of depth there. So I'm hearing you say, not only were you able to utilize these things for your own life, but then they instantly translated in how you were able to benefit clients.
Yes. I remember one time, because when I would work with kids, I would always ask the parents to come in, and usually it's mom bringing in a child, and there's parents always want you to fix their child. This is your job as a therapist, and I would say, certainly I will work with the child. I want to work with you as the mom, but I require that dad comes in at least once. And so I would sit down with them, and I would sit down with the brain chart and go over basically what we call the elevator in the brain now. We didn't call it that back then, but looking at how the brain works, and helping dad understand that, and the light bulbs would go on for the dads. And so I would say, I want you to understand this, because I may send some homework home with your child that you're going to go, why do you want them to do that? And I want you to know that I know what I'm doing. And I remember sitting with one dad in particular, and tears started running down his face, because I was talking about how parents help their child's brain form. And I was like, I am so sorry. This is really affecting you. And he said, nobody ever did this for me. And we were talking about the importance of affection and appreciation. And it was just a really simple presentation, but being able to connect with people in that way and say, let me help you understand your child's brain and your brain. It really opens things up for people. And in a lot of ways, it helped clients be much more open to therapeutic interventions, because I was explaining why this works, in a simple way they could understand.
And it makes me think about the song that you wrote, right? I love you when you're happy. I know the first time I heard that song, I think I've told you one of our past conversations, it was so powerful for me as somebody who has trauma A as in my past, right? That when I heard the song, it took my breath away, and it really impacted me in the Thrive training. And so just for everybody hearing, Dawn wrote a song, and maybe you could tell us the history, but the song is a part of the Thrive training. When we're in track 1, actually track 2 comes in and sings the song to us. And I took a picture of that. I sing it to my children. I have sing it to my clients. Sometimes I have them take it and sing it to their client and their children. And I mean, there's lots of tears that go around just because it's such a powerful way to express affection. So maybe you could tell us a little bit of the story about how you wrote that song.
Sure. So my youngest daughter was, I think, around 4 years old. She was still taking naps. So she might have been younger than that. But there was one day when it was time for her to go take her nap, and she looked at me and she put her little hands on her hips and she said, I'm mad, and mad people don't take naps. 4-year-old logic, right? I was like, okay. So I tried every trick that I knew in my therapist toolbox, and I had plenty of them. I did a lot of work with kids. I'm like, okay, nothing is working. So I'm like, what would Dr. Wilder do? And I thought, oh, he talked about how singing is so powerful. So I scooped her up and I sat down in the rocking chair and I just started singing to her, and rocked her a little bit, and she fell asleep, and I put her down for a nap. So it was like, hey, well, this is good. And then I was like, well, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star is nice, but what if we had some songs? What if we had some return to joy from all of the big 6 negative emotions? And so I was like, maybe I could write that little song. So I wrote that out, and I thought, oh, I'm going to sing this to my kids. And so I sang it with them when they were little. But then I wrote an email to Dr. Wilder, and I just told him the story and said, hey, here it is. Here are the lyrics. It's just a simple little ditty, and I didn't think anything of. Well, he wrote back, Monica.
He's so good at that.
Wrote back. And he said, would you come sing this at our conference that's coming up? And I was like, oh my gosh. So that was a huge step for me. But I did. I went and I sang it, and Mary Beth Poole was like, would you sing this into my phone? And, and so that's where that got started. And so that's where that song came from.
It might be important just because we, that song isn't easy to access. It's not like you could just go to a website and find it. So just maybe, can you say the first stanza just so listeners can hear
Sure.
concept?
Yeah, so it goes, I love you when you're happy. I love you when you're sad. I love you when you scream and shout so very mad. I love you when you're peaceful and when we dance and play. My child, I love you all the time, all night and every day. So when you feel disgusted or hopeless in despair, or when you're, oh shoot, I forgot the line. It's been a while.
Thoughts remind you of what you can't repair.
When you're feeling fearful and want to run so far, remember that I love you. Remember who you are. Remember Jesus loves you. Remember who you are. Yeah, so that's the first verse.
I love it. Thank you. And I think the very end is like, remember, we are family. I'm always loving you, or something like that.
And second verse is about, so the first verse is about, I love you in whatever emotion you're in. The second verse is, even when I'm having negative emotions, I still love you.
Yes.
Because so many children don't understand that. Parents will withhold love either when the child is misbehaving or when they're not feeling it. And so that communication of, yes, we can have these big emotions and we can feel bad, but that doesn't mean we don't love each other. Right. And I had some clients that I sang that to, and they would just cry. And I'm like, it's such a simple little song, but what it communicates is powerful. So I'm glad that God gave it to me.
Yes, it just communicates the bond and the unconditional love and acceptance that I think as parents, we want to get that, like, that's the intention, that we do, but we're human. And so to be able to sing that, to be able to say it, like, I love you. I may not be acting like it right now, but you are my person. It's just so grounding for a child. And I think it's grounding for a couple. I think it's grounding. So it's beautiful. So anyway, that's a little bit of a side note. And I know we don't have a ton of time left. So I want to get to this portion. I definitely want you to be able to kind of tell us how all this has now culminated. I mean, you're basically giving your life work is in this very specific niche of life model work. And I don't know if you would term it like that, but maybe you can kind of pull it together a little bit in terms of your whole life and how you came to be doing what you're doing now and why it's such a passion for you.
Absolutely. Well, as a therapist, this was the model that I started using. And, there are a lot of things that you can pull into it, but as a meta model, it just works so very well. So to be able to have, to understand 5 to Thrive, to be able to recognize, is this person, do we need to focus on healing or do we need to focus on growing in maturity? To not have to give people to be able to diagnose if that's what's helpful, but also to say to clients, look, this is something that if you apply these tools, you are able to, you're going to grow through this and you will be able to make this problem will become much, much, much smaller. So that was very helpful. But then I went on this, in the journey of our lives, God eventually called me out of counseling and into business consulting of all things, which I still think is hilarious because I am not a numbers person. And I was working for a secular agency. I was doing counseling and I kept having this pull to leave the agency and start a business. And at that point I was a single mom and God is saying, leave your stable, secure income, which may not have been very high, but at least it was stable and secure, and come on this adventure with me and start this business. And so eventually I did, and I went through some iterations, but what I found myself doing was working with business people,
Right.
doing consulting and coaching for business people, utilizing the same skills that I had learned. But it's what we talked about earlier, Monica, that once you've experienced healing, God's dreams for us are bigger than our dreams for ourselves. And God cares about how we make a living. Yes. And so I was working with business people doing strategic business prayer. I eventually wrote a book about it called Strategic Business Prayer, which is not an awesome title, but at least it describes what it is. And then at one point, I'm this single mom. I'm doing coaching and consulting. I also had a contract to do corporate chaplaincy. I was subcontracting for a leadership development consultant. So I would do training with them. So I just had all these different pieces. And I was like, Lord, I know you've called me to do all of these things, but I do not understand how they all fit together. I feel like I've got these puzzle pieces. Would you show me the puzzle box cover?
Yes.
And he did. And he gave me a vision of something that would be part church, part retreat center, part school. And it wouldn't be necessarily any one of those. It was this combination of these things. And it would develop leaders to be sent out into the world to train other people how to do this, to lead and to train. And I was like, okay, Lord, this is way too big for me. What do you want me to do with this? You've shown me where I'm going. No, I'm not sure I wanted to know that, but what do I do with this? And he said two things. Number one, rest into it. Basically, you're right. This is too big for you. Just wait on me to make this happen. And number two, deeper walk will be involved.
Okay.
And at that point, I barely knew what deeper walk was. I had met the president, Marcus Warner, one time, and we'd had a little bit of, email interaction, but I didn't know much about it. I was very involved with Life Model Works. And so I was like, well, okay. So, I've got this vision, the puzzle box cover. And 2 weeks later, Marcus called me and he said, we need more women on our board. Would you be willing to be on our board? And I probably would have said no, except for God had already told me that Deeper Walk was going to be part of my life. So it was like, okay, well, this is really interesting. So I guess I say yes to this. And then eventually, it's been about two or 3 years ago now. So I was on the board and doing a lot of stuff with Deeper Walk. And we were asked to educate some up and coming pastors, and there was a bishop at a particular denomination who called Marcus and said, I've got 5 guys that I either need to send to seminary or send them to you. I'd really like to send them to you. Do you have anything for them? And so Marcus called several of us together and said, we've been talking about starting a seminary. What can we do? And so we started the Deeper Walk School of Ministry, and we train pastors, missionaries, counselors, and lay people how to do prayer ministry, including inner healing prayer work, spiritual warfare, and self-care. How do you make sure that you're doing your own work? And then we also look at advanced issues, because I want them to know when to refer. If you're a lay minister and you've got somebody that walks in your door and they've got DID, or they may be psychotic, you need to know when you need to send them to a clinician. And so we talk about all those kinds of things as well. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm the director of the Deeper Walk School of Ministry, and training prayer ministers and loving it.
I love that story. Thank you for taking the time to tell it. I think that it's an important piece, in terms of you've been tracking with the model for decades now, and now
Mhm.
you have your assignment.
Yes.
That seems like this might be for the duration, and that it's kind of a big job that you're doing. And I think part of our connection is we've got these two different streams going on, but they're similar enough that we think, there might be some merging together throughout the years. And so I'm glad that you and I have gotten to know each other well this year. And I'm really excited that you allowed me to interview you for this episode today. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you, Monica. I hope I didn't tell stories that were too long, but it's a lot of fun.
No, it's awesome. I loved it. I think everybody's going to really enjoy hearing about it. And I think, when we are kind of life model groupies, that's how we hear about each other, but we don't always have the time to hear each other's stories. And so I think this is a way that we're going to be able to even archive and hear each other's stories about how we came into the model and why it's become such an important part of our lives that we have felt the Lord call us to give our time, talent, and treasure to seeing the gospel come to life for people through this means. And so I've really appreciated the time we've had together today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Monica. It's been good to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of The Place Therapists Grow. We hope you will join us next Monday. To expand your knowledge and continue your growth journey, go to cftinstitute.com and take our assessment. See you next time.